Breaking news from inside one of the city's most powerful corporations. An ordinary morning at Grant and Hawthorne turned extraordinary when a woman who had gone unnoticed for years suddenly became the center of a storm that not even the company's iron-willed CEO could control. Her name was Isabelle Reed, a quiet, precise, almost invisible figure in the company's vast glass headquarters. She was the kind of person who never drew attention to herself, the type who made everything run smoothly without ever being thanked for it. Colleagues often said she was more like a shadow than an employee, always present, yet somehow unseen. But all that changed on a single morning when a courier arrived at her desk carrying a simple, elegant bouquet of flowers. What happened next sent shockwaves through every floor of the building. It was a little before 10 when the delivery arrived. The office hummed with its usual rhythm, keyboards tapping, phones ringing, the faint aroma of coffee drifting from the break room. Most people were half distracted, counting minutes to their next meeting or scrolling through emails. Isabelle sat at her desk in her emerald green blouse, typing quietly, her posture perfect, her attention fixed. She didn't notice the courier until he was standing in front of her desk, holding out the bouquet with a polite smile and a small white envelope attached. Her name was printed in gold across the front, Isabelle Reed, and a faint scent of roses escaped as she touched it. For a moment, she hesitated. No one ever sent her flowers. In all her years at the firm, no one had ever noticed her birthday, her late nights, or the way she always fixed the printer when it jammed. But there they were, radiant blooms arranged with care, a quiet gesture of affection sitting boldly in the middle of her desk for the whole office to see. It didn't take long for people to notice. Whispers rose like a current through the open plan room. Heads turned. Curious smiles appeared. Someone in marketing leaned toward another and murmured, "Who are those for?" When the answer came, Isabelle Reed. The disbelief was almost visible. The same Isabelle who kept her hair in a neat bun, who spoke softly, who never lingered at after-work drinks. It couldn't be. Yet there it was, her name, her flowers, her mystery sender. She didn't read the card immediately. Instead, she set the vase beside her monitor, trying to ignore the murmurs. But curiosity won. She slid her finger under the seal, opened the card, and read the single line written in elegant handwriting. To the woman who makes the world better without asking for praise, thank you for existing. No signature, only an initial. That was all. Simple, beautiful, and strangely intimate. Somewhere behind her, Savannah Clark, the CEO's executive assistant, polished and radiant in her red lipstick, paused mid-conversation. Savannah's gaze lingered a moment too long, and a few people noticed. Across the room, one of the junior partners arched an eyebrow. Someone whispered, "She must be seeing someone." Another replied, "Who? She barely talks to anyone." The speculation spread, but no one could guess the truth. Because there was none to tell, Isabelle herself had no idea who had sent them. At exactly 10:07 a.m., Alexander Grant, the CEO of Grant and Hawthorne, stepped out of his office. Tall, precise, and perpetually controlled, he was a man who operated on schedule and principle. 5 times a day, he passed Isabelle's desk without a word, as if she were part of the furniture. But that morning, as he walked by, his eyes caught the color, the deep, romantic red of the roses, the gentle pink of lilies, the glint of water in the clear glass vase. He slowed his pace. His gaze shifted from the flowers to the woman sitting behind them. Isabelle looked up, just for a moment, and smiled, not at him, but at the flowers. A small, soft smile that seemed to belong entirely to another world. Something flickered in his expression, then something quick and unguarded. He didn't speak, didn't break stride. But for those 2 seconds, the man who ruled the company seemed strangely human. He walked on, but the mood of the office had changed. The silence that followed his brief stop was heavy, charged with the unspoken question, why had Alexander Grant stopped? At 10:10, Isabelle's computer chimed. A meeting request appeared in her inbox. No subject line, no details, just from Alexander Grant. The time was immediate. The location, his office. When she entered the glass-walled room at 10:15, the city skyline glimmered behind him, sunlight pouring across his desk like a spotlight. He didn't look up at first. He was reviewing a document, his posture impeccable. When he finally did speak, his voice was calm, clipped, professional. You've compromised the neutrality of this office, Miss Reed. You've allowed personal matters to interfere with professional standards." She stood still, hands clasped in front of her, and said nothing. Her heart beat faster, but her expression remained composed. "Sir, I don't," she began, but he cut her off. "It's not about intent. It's about perception. You've disrupted the environment we maintain here." His words were precise, surgical, as if he were dissecting a problem rather than addressing a person. But she could hear it, the strain beneath the surface, the edge of something personal. He didn't ask about the flowers. He didn't ask who sent them. He didn't need to. His mind had already decided that they represented something he couldn't control. And control was everything to Alexander Grant. When he finished speaking, he set down his pen and said quietly, "You can collect your things by the end of the day." The sentence was so simple it almost didn't sound real. She didn't protest. There was no point. Arguing would only feed his certainty. Instead, she gave a small nod, turned, and walked out. Her heels made no sound on the polished floor. Outside, the office was silent, every eye carefully pretending not to look. But everyone was listening. Listening to the woman who had just lost her job for receiving flowers at 11:01. Isabelle returned to her desk. She sat down with the grace of someone who had long practiced composure in the face of invisibility. She opened her drawer and began to gather her few belongings. A framed photo of her mother, a small ceramic swan her niece had painted, and a pen Alexander had once borrowed during a meeting. It was nothing special, just a silver pen with the company's name engraved on the side. But she kept it now, not out of sentiment, but quiet defiance. Around her, the hum of the office began to rise again. People pretending to work while whispering behind screens. The flowers still glowed in the vase, untouched, unaware of the chaos they had caused. They stood as a symbol of kindness, of jealousy, of something beautiful that the world wasn't ready for. And somewhere behind the glass wall of his office, Alexander Grant stood motionless, watching her pack her things. No one could hear the thoughts racing behind his composed expression, but one thing was certain. For the first time in years, the man who ruled his empire had lost control. And it wasn't over profits, deadlines, or competition. It was over a feeling he couldn't name, one that had bloomed quietly, like a flower on a forgotten desk, until it was too late to ignore. Inside Grant and Hawthorne, the hum of the morning had shifted into something heavier, more electric. Word of what had happened spread through the office corridors like wine through tall grass, soft at first, then faster, gathering momentum with every whispered exchange. By noon, everyone knew. Isabelle Reed, the quiet, invisible employee who'd sat in the same corner for years without drawing a second glance, had been fired. The reason? A bouquet of flowers. It sounded absurd when spoken aloud, but those who had witnessed the chain of events knew that it was not the flowers themselves that had caused the chaos. It was the reaction they had triggered in the man who ruled the company. Alexander Grant had always been an enigma to his employees. A man of discipline and structure, he built his reputation on precision, not passion. He was known to speak only when necessary, to delegate with mathematical efficiency, and to run his company like a machine that never faltered. No one had ever seen him flustered. No one had ever heard him raise his voice. To most, he was a figure of quiet power, admirable, unreachable, and untouchable. But that morning had exposed something different, something that didn't fit within the rigid order he lived by. The sight of the flowers on Isabelle's desk had unsettled him in a way that even he didn't fully understand. Those who had seen his brief pause by her desk described it as almost imperceptible, a flicker in time. But in a man like Alexander Grant, even a 2-second hesitation meant something monumental. That pause, that involuntary moment of attention, was the first time he had truly seen Isabelle. Not as an employee or a cog in the corporate system, but as a woman, a person, someone who smiled softly to herself over a gesture of kindness. And that, to him, was dangerous. In the hours that followed, speculation filled every department. People in marketing whispered theories by the coffee machine, while the assistants in HR exchanged knowing looks over their monitors. She must have been seeing someone important, one of them said. Someone powerful enough to get under his skin. Others disagreed. Maybe it was him. Someone whispered cautiously, and a ripple of disbelief followed. Alexander Grant, sending flowers to his own employee? Impossible. Unthinkable. He wasn't capable of something as emotional as that. Or at least, that's what they all believed. But no one could deny the change in the atmosphere after he saw the bouquet. Even Savannah Clark, his confident, ever-composed assistant, had been thrown off balance. She was used to having his full attention during meetings, her voice the only one he listened to with visible interest. But that morning, his focus had drifted. His eyes had wandered, just once, to where Isabelle sat. And Savannah, sharp as ever, had noticed. The look that crossed her face, half confusion, half recognition, was not lost on her colleagues. When Isabelle's meeting request appeared, the office had collectively held its breath. People pretended not to watch as she rose from her desk, smoothed her blouse, and made her way to the CEO's office. Her posture was calm, but everyone could sense the tension beneath her surface. The glass walls of Alexander's office offered no privacy. They could see the outlines of both figures inside, his tall frame rigid behind the desk, her slender silhouette standing motionless before him. No one could hear their voices, but they could feel the chill in the air, the kind of quiet that comes before something breaks point. 15 minutes later, Isabelle emerged. Her expression was unreadable, her steps even. She walked back to her desk without looking at anyone. Behind her, Alexander remained standing in his office, staring at the door long after it had closed. His assistant tried to approach him, folder in hand, but he waved her off with a silent gesture. The entire floor seemed to exhale in unison. Within minutes, the emails started circulating. Isabelle Reed, termination effective immediately. The subject line was neutral, the phrasing sterile. But the story beneath it was anything but. As people tried to return to work, their focus splintered. Some felt sympathy for Isabelle, others curiosity, and a few, jealousy. She had been invisible for years. Yet in a single morning, she had managed to stir emotions in both the most powerful man in the company and everyone who worked beneath him. It was as if her quiet existence had suddenly become a mirror, reflecting everything the rest of them were afraid to acknowledge. Their longing to be noticed, to be appreciated, to matter. Meanwhile, Isabelle sat at her desk, packing her things in silence. Each movement was deliberate. The photo of her mother went into her bag, then the little ceramic swan her niece had painted, and finally the pen, the one Alexander had borrowed during a meeting months ago. It was just an ordinary pen, but it held meaning now, a reminder of a moment so small it would have gone unnoticed if not for everything that came after. Across the room, David from accounting watched quietly. He wasn't part of the gossip. He rarely was. But he'd seen Isabelle often, noticed the way she helped others without being asked, how she made the office function smoothly while receiving none of the credit. He'd noticed her invisibility, and now he was watching it unravel. He wanted to say something, anything, but the word stuck. He wasn't sure if she wanted kindness or space, so he simply sat there, waiting for a moment that might never come. Inside his office, Alexander Grant couldn't focus. The rest of the morning was a blur of meetings that he barely registered. He heard people speaking, saw slides changing on the screen, but his mind was elsewhere. He replayed that moment in his head again and again. The smile, the flowers, the faint scent of roses. It shouldn't have mattered. It was nothing. Yet somehow, it had felt like everything. The idea that someone had sent her those flowers, that she had smiled like that because of someone else, filled him with a sharp, inexplicable unease. It was jealousy, though he refused to name it. He told himself it was about professionalism, about maintaining order. But deep down, a quieter truth echoed. He had lost control over a feeling he didn't even know he had. By early afternoon, the news of Isabelle's dismissal had reached even the executive floor. Some questioned his decision. Over flowers, one senior partner muttered in disbelief. But no one dared challenge him directly. Alexander Grant's authority was absolute. Still, there was a sense that something had fractured. His reputation for composure, the unshakable calm that defined him, had cracked, and everyone could sense it. For Isabelle, the day moved in slow motion. Time stretched as she finished clearing her desk, the weight of quiet eyes on her back. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't try to defend herself. There was nothing to defend. The note from the bouquet was still tucked inside her drawer, the faint scent of rose lingering on the paper. She read it one last time before slipping it into her bag. To the woman who makes the world better without asking for praise. The words stung now, not because they weren't true, but because they had cost her everything. Outside, the city continued to move, the sound of traffic, the rhythm of lives untouched by hers. But inside that office, something had changed permanently. People would remember that morning, the flowers, and the firing that followed. They would remember the silence that came after, the unease in their boss's expression, the strange melancholy that seemed to linger in the air. What none of them could have known was that for Alexander Grant, the moment wasn't over. The image of those flowers, the color of that smile, the quiet strength of the woman he'd dismissed, these things would stay with him, haunting him more deeply than he could admit. And for Isabelle Reed, though she walked out of that building stripped of her job, she carried with her something far more powerful. The undeniable proof that even in a world built to overlook her, she had been seen. When Isabelle Reed walked out of Alexander Grant's office at precisely 11:01 that morning, she did not weep, argue, or falter. She simply moved with the quiet grace that had always defined her, though this time every step seemed to echo in her chest like a heartbeat. Around her, the air of the office was thick, almost reverent, as though something sacred had been broken and no one dared speak of it. She sat down at her desk and began to gather the small, almost invisible tokens of her life there. A photo of her mother, smiling despite the fading edges of the frame. A ceramic swan her niece had painted in uneven shades of blue. The company pin Alexander had borrowed months ago, his initials still faintly scratched near the clip. None of it was worth much, but each object carried the soft weight of belonging, of time spent unnoticed yet not entirely unlived. The flowers still sat beside her monitor, tall and impossibly beautiful, their fragrance delicate but strong enough to reach her even now. People pretended to work, their screens glowing with spreadsheets and emails they weren't reading. Every eye found its way back to her, and when she looked up, they looked away just as quickly. No one dared to speak. The sound of her drawer closing, the quiet scrape of her chair, all of it became a kind of farewell music. She felt invisible again, not in the comfortable way she used to be, but in a sharper, more painful way. The kind that comes when people see you but don't know what to do with what they see. David from accounting, seated a few desks away, couldn't look away. He'd noticed her long before that morning. How she moved through the office with a calm that steadied others. How she managed kindness without calling attention to it. He had watched her pick up dropped papers for interns too nervous to thank her, fix small problems no one else wanted to handle, and disappear into the background once the issue was solved. To him, Isabelle had always been a quiet miracle, one that made the office more bearable. And now, she was leaving because someone else had finally seen her too, but in all the wrong ways. He wanted to say something, to tell her that the flowers suited her, that someone should have sent them a long time ago, but the words stayed trapped behind his teeth. Alexander Grant remained inside his office, but his focus was gone. His meetings passed like clouds, faces talking, numbers flashing on screens, but nothing landing. His mind circled the same images over and over. The flowers, her smile, the sound of his own voice delivering a sentence that now felt like punishment more than policy. He told himself he had done the right thing, that professionalism required boundaries. But beneath that armor of logic was something raw and unexplainable, a discomfort that came from recognizing the lie he had told himself for years. He had always believed control meant strength, that emotion was weakness. Yet now he found himself haunted by a single moment of beauty, a smile that wasn't meant for him, as Isabelle packed. She thought of how easily people could be erased. Years of work could dissolve in minutes, leaving no trace except the memories others chose to keep. She wondered if anyone would remember the way she helped without asking, the projects she saved before deadlines collapsed, or the quiet efficiency that kept everything running. Probably not. The world rarely remembered those who worked in silence. But maybe that was all right. Maybe being invisible had protected her from something far worse, being seen only to be misunderstood. Still, she couldn't ignore the sting of it, the unfairness. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was the one leaving while the man who had condemned her remained untouched behind his glass walls. She looked at the flowers again and felt a strange gratitude toward whoever had sent them. Whether it was admiration, love, or simple kindness. The gesture had given her something she hadn't known she needed, proof that her existence mattered to someone, even if that someone remained a mystery. The clock on the wall ticked past noon. People began to move again, returning to their routines with forced energy. The rhythm of the office tried to repair itself, but it wasn't the same. Even those who had gossiped the loudest now felt the uncomfortable awareness of what had happened. It was as if the firing had exposed something fragile beneath the company's polished exterior. The truth that beneath all their professionalism and hierarchy, they were still human, still vulnerable to emotion. When Isabelle finally stood to leave, the room seemed to shift. No one clapped, no one said goodbye, but the silence was full of things left unsaid: regret, guilt, admiration. She lifted her bag, her hand brushing the edge of the desk one last time. She had spent years here, pouring quiet effort into a place that never once said thank you. And now, in her absence, they would realize how much she had held together. David rose halfway from his seat before he stopped himself. Then, just as she turned toward the elevator, he found the courage to speak. His voice was soft, almost tentative. "Hey, Isabelle," he said. She paused, turning slightly. Their eyes met, and in that small exchange, there was more understanding than words could carry. "You deserve those flowers," he said finally. For the first time since the morning began, she smiled. It was small, but it was real, a fragile warmth breaking through the coldness that had settled in her chest. "Thank you," she said simply, and her voice carried through the quiet like sunlight through a window. Then she walked away. After she was gone, the office slowly returned to motion, but something in its balance had shifted. The empty desk became a quiet reminder of everything people took for granted. The quiet workers, the unacknowledged kindness, the humanity buried beneath policy. The flowers remained for a while, still standing in their glass vase, their colors deepening as the day wore on. People avoided touching them, as though they carried a story too delicate to disturb. In his office, Alexander watched the space she'd left behind. From where he stood, he could see the corner of her desk, the faint shimmer of water in the vase. He tried to push the image from his mind, but it stayed with him, stubborn and alive. He felt a pull he didn't recognize: regret, maybe, or guilt, or something more dangerous. He had fired her to maintain control, but in doing so, he had lost the one thing that had made him feel human in years. The realization settled over him with quiet finality. For a man who measured life in achievements, Isabelle's absence became the first thing he couldn't quantify. Days later, the office returned to its polished rhythm. New emails arrived, meetings resumed, the city outside moved forward. But whispers lingered, about the flowers, about the boss who had faltered, about the woman who had finally been seen only to vanish. Her story became part of the company's quiet mythology, retold in fragments during coffee breaks and late evenings. Some spoke of injustice, others of envy, but all agreed on one thing: Isabelle Reed had changed something. For Isabelle herself, the world beyond those glass walls felt strange at first, too open, too bright. Yet as she stepped into the cold afternoon air, a weight lifted. For the first time in years, she wasn't part of someone else's system. She was free to exist without being overlooked or defined by her invisibility. The flowers still glowed in her memory, not as a symbol of loss, but of awakening. And somewhere behind the mirrored windows of Grant and Hawthorne, Alexander Grant stood by his desk, staring at the empty space where she used to sit. He told himself he had done the right thing, that order had been restored. But in the quiet moments between meetings, he would glance toward that corner and feel something he couldn't suppress. The echo of a smile that had undone him, the haunting realization that power meant nothing when the heart chose to see what it wasn't supposed to. In the end, Isabelle's story wasn't about flowers or jealousy. It was about the human need to be seen, to be valued, to be remembered. In her silence, she had taught them something no memo or policy ever could. That recognition isn't about titles or status, but about acknowledging the quiet souls who make the world better without ever asking to be noticed. And as the days passed, long after her desk was cleared and her name was erased from the company directory, her presence lingered, in the scent of the roses, in the memory of that morning, and in the heart of the man who finally learned that invisibility does not mean absence.